So I now have the basic logic and the basic wireframe roughed out for my quiz. Now I can go through and squash some bugs and some usability issues. And in the previous presentation, I identified a couple of issues, and I can anticipate, based on the glitches that I can anticipate some future glitches. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to think about the functionality of my quiz. And one of the things that I want to do is I want to be able to answer a question and go to the next scene after the points have been awarded. So I can build that into the right and wrong answer, and I'll do that a little bit later. But in addition to that, my logic only sets the active player as true, and we found that we could, we can kind of defeat the system that we created. The first thing that I want to fix is I want to fix the ability for two different players to buzz in at the same time. Because remember, if I reload my presentation and I'm now on question 1, or the only question that I have in my game, I could buzz in as player 1. I just hit the Z button, and so now I'm buzzing in as player 1. Well, there's nothing to stop player 2 from leaning over and pressing their buzz-in question, and now we're both earning points. So we need a couple things to happen. And I think what would be interesting is that if we pressed a button, if we buzzed in, and if I buzz in as player 1 or I buzz in as player 2, this buzzer object and all of the logic attached to it goes away, then that'll solve the problem of being able to buzz in two players in the same scene. And I can do that by destroying the game object. So I'm just going to jump back to scene 1, or actually it doesn't matter what scene because I want to focus on my actors. And I want to take a close look at my buzzer. And remember, my buzzer is tracking whether Z or backslash is being pressed. And at the end of that logic, what I want to do is I'm looking for a destroy. And what destroy does is immediately remove the actor from the scene. I'm going to take the destroy and I'm just going to drag and drop it into the end of both of these rules. And so now I'm just going to, run through this logic real quick. Basically what this is saying is that when I buzz in with the Z key, it's going to trigger or flip the switch or set true the active player boolean, and then it's going to destroy this button, meaning that I don't have the chance to hit the backslash key to activate player 2. And alternatively, if I hit the backslash key, what it's doing is it's setting player 2 to true, and then it's destroying the active actor. So that'll be a real simple fix, assuming it works the way that I anticipate, that when I hit the Z key, that worked, it destroyed the actor, and now I'll get the wrong answer, and okay, I just lost points. Well, I still have this glitch that, now I can correct for that by clicking on this as many times as I want to, so now I need to fix something for these buttons. And I think the fix will be, okay, when I earn my points, send me to the next scene. But for now, I have that buzzer logic taken care of for the most part. There's still a little bit of a loophole, because remember, I'm active player 1. Player 1 has been set active. That's a game level attribute, meaning that when I go to scene 2, player 1 is still active. And presumably I'll have my questions, my answers, my buzzer here, and so if I buzz in with player 2, I now have a situation where player 1 and player 2 are both set to active. So I'll correct for that here in a short bit. What I want to do is I want to jump back into the question 1 scene just so I can stay organized here. And what I want to do is when I get a wrong answer, I want to be able to, whether I'm player 1 or player 2, I want to be able to go to the next scene. So I'm just going to save what I'm working on. I haven't saved for a little while. And so what I'll do is I want to change scene. And I'll drag and drop the change scene, and I'll drop that kind of outside this logic here. So the rule goes something like this. When I press on this and this logic is true, so the player 1 is true, do this to the score and then change the scene. And in fact, what I could do is I could actually drag it up into the point where it adds to the score and then changes scene. Now, I don't think it will be so rewarding if the minute we select the button, it bumps up our score and we lose our scene. What I want to do is I want to see the score change and pause for a second before I leave the scene. And so I think what I want to do is I want to get rid of that change scene and I want to put it inside a timer. So I want to give us a few seconds to enjoy our victory over that question. And so what I'll do is I'll throw this inside the player one is true. So in other words, we've pushed the button. And I've thrown that inside the player one is true, earn points, and now we want to wait, let's say 2 seconds. We don't want we want after 2 seconds, we want to change scene. So I'll go find my change scene, and I'll drag and drop that inside the timer, and I want to go to the next scene. So if this logic is working properly, when I'm player one, it's going to switch over after 2 seconds to the next scene. It's not the case for player two just yet, but before I commit to this logic, let me test it. So I'll go to scene one, I press the Z key, which destroys my buzzer on this scene. I'll get the wrong answer, and when I count to 1, 2, nothing happens. Okay, so I know that there's dysfunction in my logic. Things are not working the way it should, because if they should, I should see this active screen go to question 2. I know I was player one, because it assigned the score to player one, and I can test that much. But if I go back to my question one scene, and I go back into my wrong answer, and I'll take a look at my logic, I suspect that after 2 seconds, if I say run to completion, it should go to next scene. Now, technically, as from a logic standpoint, I don't think I should have to do that, but hopefully that'll solve my problem. So I'm loading. I'll test this one more time. I'm going to press the Z key. Okay, so I know that my buzzer's been destroyed. My active player is set to 1. I'll subtract my score. I'll count to 2, and there we go. Now my logic is working. So when I get the wrong answer, currently for player 1, it takes me to question 2. So I'm getting closer to my mock-up for my scene working. Now, so this timer function is working beautifully. It's working the way that it's supposed to, and it's inside the player 2 being set to true. And what I could do is I should be able to, let's try to hold down the option key. I'm just going to drag, I'm going to copy that whole logic, and I want to make sure I'm dropping this in the right place. And so I'll just compare the two here. So we're looking to see if the game attribute is 2. If so, there we go. I was missing something. I want to start from the top here. Something looks strange. So in other words, if I'm pressing this button, so if it's been pressed and player is true, update the score of player 1, wait 2 seconds and go to the next screen. Now I'll just kind of run through this logic. So when this object is touched, if player 2 is true, update the player 2 score and then wait 2 seconds and go to the next scene. So no matter at this point, no matter which player I'm buzzed in as, and I've already tested player 1, I should be able to buzz in as player 2, get a wrong answer, and now it takes me to the next scene. So I know that my red buttons, the logic works, and I could distribute that over multiple scenes, and it should hold up. Let me fix or make that the case for my green button, and I'll do that by double-clicking on the green button in the actor attribute, and I'll just add that same logic of the timer. So I'll go down here and I'll find timer. There's my timer, and I'll throw it just under this change attribute. I remember that run to completion needs to be checked. I'm going to change it for after 2 seconds, and the 2 seconds is kind of an arbitrary choice. Maybe you want it longer or shorter. We can always change it later. Then I want to do a change scene, and I want to go to the next scene. Now, typically I would test this every time I make this kind of logic. I would test it to make sure that it works, but I feel pretty confident that this will work as it's supposed to. I'm going to option drag to duplicate that whole timer action and drop it in the same place for our alternate rule. And by the way, one thing I haven't mentioned yet, we can rename these rules. These by default, these rules start off with a default name, and basically what we could do is we could say this rule is testing to see if player 1 is active. Okay, we give it a really long name like that, like a note. Or this, I'll just simply call it player 1 test. So we're testing to see if player 1 is true, and down here we're testing to see if player 2 is true, and if that's the case, it's going to assign the appropriate logic or the appropriate function. So at this point, I should have something that's scalable. I still have one more glitch in my wireframe, but I'll solve that in the next presentation. But before I do, let me just give this a quick test. I'm going to run my preview, and I want to run that from the loading screen just to be thorough. So I'm running it from my loading screen by double-clicking on the screen. It takes over into scene 1, and at this point, no matter what I do, I should be able to buzz in as player 1 and player 2, and the green and the red button logic should work just fine. So I'll buzz in as player 1, I'll get the correct answer, and I see that my score bumped up 10. Now I go to question 2. The only glitch that I have is currently in this situation, when I move to to scene 2, player 1 was previously set to true. Well, now when I arrive at question 2, player 1 is still set to true. Player 2 is set to false. And so once I get my buzzer on screen, if I buzz in as player 2, now I'm in a situation where player 1 and player 2 will both be set to true. And I want to correct for that. And I'll do that in the next presentation.